Welcome back to our panel discussion, Enhancing Employee Engagement, Best Practices for Government, sponsored by Cornerstone On Demand, here on federalnewsradio.com and 1500 AM. My guests today are Jeff Marootian, the Assistant Secretary for Administration at the Transportation Department, Towanda Brooks, the Chief Human Capital Officer at Housing and Urban Development, Steve Dobberowsky, Principal for Thought Leadership and Advisory Services at Cornerstone On Demand, Julie Brill is the Manager of Work-Life Leadership and Executive Development Policy at the Office of Personnel Management, and Philippe Lussier, the Deputy Assistant Secretary of State for the Bureau of Human Resources. And I wanted to continue a little bit for a moment on that training idea. And I wanted to ask you, Phil, you mentioned earlier some of the experienced employees, long-time employees that are involved in highly technical and highly sensitive, secure diplomatic activities related to Defense Department and nuclear non-proliferation. Yeah. How do you, sometimes they might need training, and how do you get them to engage in it in a way that they understand it's not because they're deficient in some way, but because it enhances their career and their standing?
Well, you make it mandatory, Tom.
That's one way.
But no, that's a very good question. One of the things we recognized as a department, how critical training was, is quite some time ago, and we invested in our own National Foreign Affairs Training Center. It's right off over in Arlington, off of Route 50. In fact, I'd like to have you come out and give you a tour sometime. But it's a small campus environment. Critical to foreign policy is language training. So all of our foreign service officers get language training before they go out to post. But two things we do. One of the things that every employee does as a new employee, foreign service, civil service, is you are required to, this is the mandatory part, to take orientation training. So one of the first things you do on day one at the department or in that short time frame as a new employee is understand what we do as a department, how you fit into that, how we're organized, what's our mission. So orientation training is mandatory. And then at the top end, more in the senior ranks, not really even the senior ranks, we have leadership and management training. Julie referred to the importance of this, is that no matter if you're a supervisor or not, you're still a leader. And every day, whether you're working on a team or a project, or you may not be a supervisor, but you need to know leadership characteristics and understand accountability and what it is. So we have 3 levels of leadership training: intermediate, beginning, intermediate, and advanced, beginning at the GS-13 and equivalent level, GS-14, GS-15, and then a senior course, so there's actually 4. And every employee is required to take that training at our National Foreign Affairs Training Center. And as well, we do technical training and so forth there. But what we find, and to summarize, is that when we hire employees, and I think this is true of all of our agencies, is they really want to know that you're not just hiring them for a job, you're hiring them for a career. And so that is training along the whole full spectrum of the career that they look for and that they seek and they thirst.
So basically you build it into the natural progression of someone working at State Department so nobody feels like they're being singled out because they need training.
Precisely.
All right. And Jeff, how does that work at transportation?
Sure. Training is critical for us, and as has been touched on, so are rotational assignments. And I just want to talk a little bit there about the work that we're doing on that front, because I think it's important, and it also helps, to Phil's point, it helps us really keep our employees engaged in the work of the department. We have 13 different operating administrations, all of which have distinct missions. And so there is always an opportunity for an employee to take on a new assignment on a short-term basis, or potentially even a longer-term basis, where they're learning a new skill set, they're learning an entire new function, they're learning a subject matter that they may have had no experience or minimal experience in. And so utilizing those types of opportunities in conjunction with specific training really help us not only help have our employees learn something new, but also keep them engaged in the work that our department is doing. And that's something on the senior executive level that was recently codified in the President's executive order on SES reform, and it's something that we feel as though we're ahead of the curve on because it's a part of our culture.
All right, and Julie, I wanted to ask you about OPM. OPM, of course, is a policy shop, so it's cross-cutting across government, but it's also an agency with its own employees. And so how does it work for OPM as an agency?
Right. No, absolutely. We often talk about little OPM and big OPM, and the big OPM is always that cross-government perspective. And picking up on what Jeff was saying about rotations, transportation also is involved in a rotational program for GS-13s through 15s, where we have about 17 agencies participating, and we rotate those GS-13s through 15s to other agencies for 6 months. And the beauty of rotations is that you're getting out of your box, you're getting a broader perspective, you're gaining competencies, but also it's no cost. And so the learning is tremendous, and so the return on that time is really large for agencies. And OPM also participates, Little OPM participates in that program as well. And so it's helping build stronger leaders, leading right up to what Jeff was talking about for the senior executives. We're really doing a lot focusing on that broader perspective. So it helps supports that.
All right, Jeff, are there any other trends in training and training delivery that we should be cognizant of here?
The important thing that we haven't really talked about was...
I should say Steve. I'm looking at Jeff's sign and looking at you. This is Steve Dobberowsky.
I'm waiting for Jeff to answer. I think one important thing that we actually got to talk about is the way we actually deliver the training. We live in a mobile workforce. How often have you gone an hour without looking at your phone? There are technologies and capabilities now that we have to deliver training that is short, consumable, called micro learning, and it's just in time. And Towanda touched on it earlier. It's giving them what they need at the right time. TED Talks, for example, great tool in terms of delivering very meaningful training to individuals, not necessarily tied to their learning management at the office. What about doing performance management on your iPad on the train to and from work? I mean, really getting into how we as a workforce operate and we conduct our work. It is those types of strategies that are important. And oftentimes what constrains us is the fear of risk or security or privacy concerns. And we really need to pull together the 3 C's. We need the CLO, we need the CHICO, and we need the CIO, CLO, and CHICO. And those 3 together can actually mitigate the risk, reduce the actual security, privacy concerns, and deliver the meaningful training and meaningful content.
Okay, I want to switch gears here for a moment from training and talk about some of the innovative programs that you are planning or launching or have in place now for your people, the people in your agency. And Jeff, why don't we start with you?
Sure. Touching on something that Steve said earlier, for us, it's not just about using the technology, but it's how we're using it, making sure that we're actually doing it in a thoughtful way. And along those lines, we're doing things that actually help facilitate some of the programs that we're running. So, for example, when we're talking about rotational assignments, we have a system where employees can not only post opportunities, but also find out about other opportunities that exist all throughout the country that they might not have otherwise had access to, and apply directly online. So that's one way, a very simple way that we're using technology effectively to communicate across the entire organization. I mentioned earlier our use of Idea Hub, which is something that I'm particularly proud of because we have so many employees participating in it. And it's really a way for us to get ideas that we can act on as management very, very quickly. If an employee suggests something that has a quick turnaround, we could do it in the same day. And a lot of times in several big initiatives have been launched because an employee took the time to write a few sentences sharing their idea. And that for us is not only an engagement tool, but it's a good management tool. When we're hearing directly from our employees and what they think they could be learning more or doing more, and we're able to provide that in the same day, it's a real win for everybody.
And this goes across all of the bureaus and components.
That's correct. It goes across our entire agency.
All right, cool. Towanda.
We have a leadership series where we've had authors to come in and talk about leadership. Those have been phenomenal. Employees have asked for additional leadership series in their book series. We have a program called The Clearinghouse where we have internal positions where we post the positions and employees can apply. And we have a wrap. Also, those are internal details for about 120 days. We have a switchboard program. I talked about that a little bit earlier. A fantastic coaching program. We've done 2 iterations of the coaching program where our leaders have participated in the coaching program, and they're now deployed where they can go out and coach our leaders through situations, which is fantastic. So we've had a couple senior executives to participate in the program and some supervisors. So we're going to run a 3rd program where our non-supervisory employees can become coaches. So we're having a coaching conference this upcoming summer. which is really going to be a fantastic opportunity.
Okay, Phil, what about State Department?
A couple things to mention, similar to my colleagues here, similar to what Jeff mentioned. We have a program that's fairly new called Flex Connect. It's basically a website and this is one where HR just steps back and lets the job market and the need, the sort of the supply demand dictate what goes on there. So there's short rotational opportunities, 30, 60, or 90 days, where a manager has a need, he posts it, and employees can respond. The only thing we require is for the person going on the detail for their supervisor to approve. Everything's done online, no paperwork, so it's very, very easy to connect a short-term need with someone who would like to have a developmental opportunity. The other thing, it's somewhat similar to what Towanda is talking about. We use technology to support a formal mentoring program. We have two mentoring programs, a formal and a situational mentoring program. And the formal program is actually a year-long program. Both the mentor and the mentee go to a day of training together, lay out, developmental plans. But we use software to do the matching of the mentor and the mentee. Potential mentors apply, put their, sort of their background, and employees look for different things in a mentor. Someone just like them, or someone completely different from them, and so they can go online.
In fact, it doesn't always have to be someone older. It could be someone younger that's really savvy in some particular area.
You're absolutely right, Tom. There's no. There's sort of this impression that to be a mentor, you need to be a senior, person in the department. Not necessarily anybody can be a mentor or a mentee. But there's a graduation ceremony at the end. There's an awards ceremony. We just did this year. Deputy Secretary Higginbottom doled out the awards. The mentees nominate mentors for awards. There's various categories. So it's sort of a recognition program for people who excel at that, too.
All right, and Julie, does OPM kind of catalog all of these activities and create a resource that other agencies can learn about and share those?
Right. So we certainly do in our role to facilitate the sharing of best practices and promising practices, so many of the programs. And as we learn about programs, we look to see if there's something that we could do and scale it government-wide. Phil mentioned their situational mentoring program, and it makes so much sense for particularly senior leaders, for senior executives who don't have time for a long-term mentoring relationship, but they may be struggling with an issue as a new executive and would love to reach out to someone in another agency who they don't work with and they don't have a huge comfort sharing a concern about. And so we've set up an SES, situational mentoring program. Each agency has a point of contact, and if an executive needs someone, then they'll go into the database and match them up, and it's listed by problem area as well as competency area. So we love to see great innovative programs start in the agencies and then see what we can scale. Actually, Towanda has been part of our federal coaching network, and her coaching program is just ballooned, just tremendously in HUD. And it really started as a government-wide effort where we said we want to create a coaching culture where conversations around performance feedback are in a positive, strength-based, results-focused way. And so we are together, the agencies really come together to do this. We're training together. We just graduated our second cohort, so we have about 120 new coaches across the government at all levels, and it just continues to grow in each agency as well as across government. So.
Okay, excellent. Steve, here's a question for the moment. There's something coming up, presidential transition, and the government is going to be more enmeshed in that in future months. And that can be distracting to employees and might affect engagement during that period of time. What are some techniques agencies can use to make sure that doesn't happen, to keep people on the job that really matters?
Sure. I think it's critical with the transition to new administration, whatever that administration looks like, that we have the senior leaders in place that focus in on those three things that we talked about early: the organizational culture, the communication style, and the transparency. And I think that those things are critical to navigate any sort of change, giving employees the sense that whatever happens, you're communicating and you're taking care of them. We're going to see shrinking budgets likely. We're going to see reductions in hiring. And so the communication becomes critical in that they don't feel that they're under attack. Oftentimes, federal employees get the bad rap that they're federal employees and that they make too much money, but really we do have a great public service cadre and giving back to their country and serving their country, and we need to make sure that we protect them in that transition and making sure that they don't lose sight of they're doing good and they're serving their nation, and that's critical. So anything that we can take to reduce it, increasing communication around performance management, feedback. I think we haven't really even touched about the millennials and the need to actually shape the millennial population coming into it. And for 3 fiscal years, we're going to actually have half of the workforce as millennials. And in 2025, it's going to be 75% of the workforce. We really need to know how millennials need to be rewarded, trained, developed, those types of things. And it goes beyond millennials. I think it's general workforce altogether.
All right, lots to think about for the future. Right now, we are coming to the end of this discussion. I want to thank today's guests. Julie Brill is the Manager of Work-Life, Leadership, and Executive Development Policy at the Office of Personnel Management. Philippe Lussier is the Deputy Assistant Secretary of State for the Bureau of Human Resources. Jeff Marootian, the Assistant Secretary for Administration at the Transportation Department. Towanda Brooks is the Chief Human Capital Officer at Housing and Urban Development. And Steve Dobberowsky, Principal for Thought Leadership and Advisory Services at Cornerstone On Demand. I'm Tom Temin, federalnewsradio.com. For more on this discussion, visit us at federalnewsradio.com.
On behalf of Cornerstone On Demand, thank you for joining our discussion today. We have the archive for this session available shortly, and a link will be sent to you to share with your colleagues. Those of you who have requested a training certificate will receive an email with download instructions immediately following the webinar. This concludes today's webinar. Thank you.